deal of what the federal government can do in intersecting with state election officials to try to tilt the election in his way. There may eventually be court battles. I agree with Matthew that the most likely scenario is that the courts will function the way they always have, and I do believe the military will. But as we know from 2000, that can be an extremely disruptive process for the country, creating a lot of uncertainty and a lack of faith in the outcome of the election.
Let me go now to Bethesda in Maryland and Alan Lichtman. Is there any precedent in US history that we can look at and we can suggest is the model moving forward? Or is this the first time this kind of language has been used?
Oh, no. We have certainly precedents here, but I want to make one quick point. The danger is not here that once the Electoral College ballots are counted, that Donald Trump will barricade himself in the White House and call on the Proud Boys to keep him in office. No. The real issue is, and the president has made this absolutely plain, that he will do everything possible to steal the election before that happens by suppressing the vote of the rising Democratic base of minorities and young people. He's absolutely brazen about that, and we've had that happen before. 2000, the election came down to Florida. Bush won Florida by 537 votes and won the presidency, but the wrong person was selected. In fact, as I proved in my 2001 report to the distinguished United States Commission on Civil Rights, as a result of the discarding of votes cast by African Americans, Al Gore should have won Florida going away. Walter Maybain, a distinguished political scientist, did a careful study following up on mine and found that Gore should have won that election by more than 30,000 votes. You can also go all the way back to 1876 in the transition from Reconstruction to white supremacy in the South, when there were disputed ballots from South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. It always seems to come down to Florida. And the truth is the Constitution says nothing about how to deal with that. And Congress set up a commission which was supposed to be evenly balanced between Democrats and Republicans. Independents turned out to be 8-7 Republican, which made every decision 8-7 in favor of the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. And there was talk about violence, about not accepting that result, about a new civil war. It didn't happen. We did have a peaceful transfer of power.
Matthew, we're talking about voter suppression here, quite a serious allegation. The reason that President Donald Trump is so confident that he might be in the White House come November is because he's already rigging the election. That seems to be an accusation coming out. What do you think?
I think it's pretty hard to argue at this point that either side is, quote unquote, rigging the election. I do think there are legitimate concerns about states that are mailing out ballots that people haven't requested to receive by mail. I don't believe there are any real legitimate criticisms about absentee voting, where someone requests a mail ballot, they receive it, and then they return it. But there are a handful of states that are doing unrequested universal mail ballots. And the problem with that is that the data that counties and states have is not going to be perfect. They're going to be mailing ballots to people who are not currently living at the place where they're sending the ballots. And that is going to create confusion. And then there's also questions about ballot harvesting, about picking up ballots and bringing them in. There are questions about whether ballots have to be postmarked and by when they have to be postmarked or when they have to be received. I think I heard yesterday in Pennsylvania, they're going to accept mail ballots for 6 days after the election, and the ballots do not have to be postmarked.
Are you saying the U.S. election system, isn't fit for purpose?
Well, I think there are legitimate questions about it, and that's why there are something like 3 or 4 dozen major lawsuits in different states, because a handful of states, I think, have gone beyond what is a reasonable system. That said, I do not believe right now that most Americans should look at this and have doubt about the integrity of the result.
Well, let me bring in Claire Finkelstein here to respond to you. Alan, I'll come to you in just a second. I will come to you in just a second. I want to bring Claire in here. Claire, what do you think of what Matthew is saying? He's saying that actually the problem isn't rigging votes, the problem isn't voter suppression, it's actually just the system.
I think what Matthew is saying is irresponsible. We have no evidence that there is widespread fraud or any risk of fraud or insecurity in the use of mail-in balloting. Washington State has used mail-in balloting extensively for many, many years. We have just about zero reports of problems with mail-in balloting. And to suggest in the middle of a pandemic, when people are afraid to go to the polls, that there is a national security problem with the use of mail-in balloting is an attempt by the Republicans, and part of their talking points, to suppress the votes, because they know that mail-in ballots are most likely to be used in heavily Democratic areas, as well as the fact that voter suppression will work to the benefit of Republicans because Democrats tend to win the popular vote. Donald Trump's best hope for winning the election legitimately is through the Electoral College. He is very unlikely to win the popular vote. And so putting it about that mail-in balloting in the middle of a pandemic runs a risk of fraud and is dangerous, I think, is an attempt at manipulation, and it should not be allowed. There should be great